Hello everyone and welcome to a very long overdue software tutorial. My name is Mitchell and today I'm going to show you just one simple aspect of Twinmotion. So I used to create videos like this on a very regular basis, but start of this year I started a new position, so I was just trying to get into it a bit, and now I'm going to be creating these videos on a more frequent basis. So if you do like what you see, please stay tuned because more will be coming in the near future. So one of the softwares that I get asked about the most is definitely Twinmotion, and very often the same questions come up, and it's to do with the importing of information. So that is what I'm going to cover here today. I'm going to cover what collapsing is in Twinmotion, and it really affects the way that you assign materials and also the way that your tree structure is generated in terms of elements and how they're grouped together. So I'm going to give you the super basics on that, and I really hope you enjoyed and that you learned something. So let's get started. Alright, so my software of choice and what I generally use is Revit. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. Obviously, there are a number of different applications that you can use, but I'm just going to be going with Revit. And I'm also going to presume that you have a bit of knowledge of Revit already. So I'm not going to really be explaining too many things here in Revit, just the really important things that you need to know for the later usage of Twinmotion. So I've got my four walls over here, and I'm going to start by just assigning them some materials. Okay, because assigning materials in your initial software is really important because it plays a role in how Twinmotion interprets that information. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these two walls, and I am going to create a material out of these two walls. Okay, so I'm going to assign here a brick material for just these two walls. Then I'm going to select this wall over here, and I'm going to do a similar process. I'm going to duplicate it, I'm going to edit the structure, and I'll actually leave this as copper, that's fine. And then this fourth wall over here, I'm going to do the same thing again, and duplicate it, and then I am going to apply, let's say, a carpet material. Okay, so I've got two walls over here which are face brick, one which is copper, one is carpet. Okay, so that's basically the sample that we're going to work with. Obviously things can get a lot more intense, but for now this is fine. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to your file and you're going to go to export. You need to be in a 3D view for this as well, and you're going to export this as an FBX file. Now there is also a Twinmotion tab that you can download, which is a built-in exporter. There's also a live link that you can explore and things like that. I'm just covering the super basics here and presuming that you have your two applications that you want to work with individually. So we're going to export it as an FBX, and I'll just call this Twinmotion testing, and I'm going to save that. All right, and then I'm going to head over to Twinmotion. Okay, so when you open up Twinmotion, you're going to get a lot of information around you. This is Twinmotion 2019. If you have 2020, it's going to work exactly the same way. So what you want to do is come down here to your bottom left, and you're going to select on import. Okay, and immediately you're going to select open, and you're going to go and navigate to wherever it is that your file is saved, and you're going to open it up. Now before you say okay, this is the main aspect that I'm going to speak to you about. We need to choose our collapse option. Okay, so this is really important, and you get three options that are available to you: collapse by material, keep hierarchy, or collapse all. Okay, so we'll start with collapse by material because collapse by material is the default and it's the recommended option as well. So I'm going to select collapse by material and say okay. Now sometimes your model might not import right in front of you, and you might actually have quite a difficult time finding it. If that ever is the case, you can just go to your element tree over here on the right hand side, this little arrow, just hit that. You'll get starting ground, which is obviously default, and then here I've got Twinmotion testing. You can see it's created a little container for me. If I really struggle to find my information, I can right click on that, zoom to selection, okay, and that'll just focus my information for me. Okay, so this is actually where we're going to start. Let's take a look at what Twinmotion has done using this collapse option. So firstly, it's created a container for us, and if I expand that container, okay, I will see that I've got four objects, but essentially I've just got three. Okay, this proxy object, we're going to ignore that. That's the actual level markers that come from Revit, so we're going to completely ignore that for now. But notice how I've got proxy object carpet, I've got copper, and then I've got brick common, and I've got two items for brick common. Okay, so what this method does, firstly, is it reduces the count of your 3D model by collapsing objects to a single one based upon the material. So firstly, it optimizes your model for real-time rendering, because obviously you can put quite a lot of strain on your GPU if everything is an individual object. Okay, so that's the first thing that it does. And let's just explore that a little bit. So if I click on my brick common over here and I actually move this out the way, notice that I've got these two walls selected that have my brick material. Okay, I could do the same thing for copper, and I could do the same thing for carpet as well. So I can control things based on their material. So let's start actually assigning some materials quickly. Assign materials, I can go to my little material browser here in the left-hand corner, or my object browser. And I can go into materials, I will use concrete in this case, and it's just a simple drag and drop. So I'm going to select this bare concrete 01, drag it and drop it onto this wall over here, and you'll notice straight away that both walls receive that same material because they are both face brick inside of the Revit software where all of this information is coming from. Okay. And I can go around to the various sides over here and I can assign different materials to objects that have different materials inside of Revit. Okay, in this case, because I've collapsed by material, I also have an object picker down here, this little icon over here. And if I click and hold on that, I have another option over here called apply to object. Okay, now just so you know, apply to object in this case is actually not really going to make any difference. If I click apply to object and I try and apply just to the single wall, notice that I still apply to both of them. Okay, because it's coming from Revit, right? We know that both of these walls share the same material, so they're always going to have the same material here. Okay, and then the other important thing, again, just to reiterate, is that here in your container, items are grouped based on their materials. Okay, so this is your first option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this from here. I'm also going to delete it from here. I could just I'm just going to import it from scratch again. So I'm going to go to import, do exactly the same thing again, select Twinmotion testing, and this time obviously I'm not going to do it collapsing by material. I'm going to choose the option, in this case let's go with keep hierarchy. Okay, so keep hierarchy, and I'm going to say okay. Okay, this one we can ignore for now. Use imported material, doesn't really matter. We're going to change it in the software anyway, or that's what I normally do. So we get exactly the same information that comes in, and let's start in our element tree over here on the right hand side. We get another container, Twinmotion testing, and if I expand that container, this time I have 4 very distinct items called walls. And if I select each one, I'll notice that every single wall is an individual object. It's not grouped based on material in this case. Okay, so it's actually an original object coming from Revit gets its own individual item essentially here in Twinmotion. Okay, so this is not optimized for Twinmotion just simply because of the fact that you could have thousands of objects, tens of thousands of objects, depending how big your model is, all being individual items, which obviously I'm sure you can imagine can cause quite a heavy load. And it's also going to take you a long time to place down materials as well. So if things are separate in your Revit model, they're going to be separate here. Okay, that's just the really important thing to keep in mind. And let's start by talking about the material assignment in this case. So material assignment in this case is actually quite nice because you've kind of got 2 options here. So again, I'll expand my materials. My base context over here is what now I actually use my bare concrete 01 up here at the top. So firstly, I'm just going to change my little object picker over here to replace material. Now, if I leave it to replace material, it kind of follows the same rules as collapsing by material, which was the previous option. So if I drag my concrete over here to this wall, notice how it still selects both of them. Or I can go to these individual walls over here. Okay, so I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to apply. I'm going to change this object pick over here to apply to object. And then in this case, if I now drag my material and place it against this wall over here, notice how I can actually assign 2 different materials to these 2 walls. Even though they both share common material inside of Revit, because I've chosen to keep the hierarchy, it hasn't grouped them by material. It's basically left them as individual elements. So I'm free to apply different materials to each one of these walls. So in this case, obviously what I'm going to be able to do is apply a different material to all 4 walls over here. Okay, so really useful if you need to do that as well, and you have a lot of individual items that you need to apply different materials to. But you still have the option of using replace material, which follows the same rules as collapsing by material. So you kind of, you know, got two birds there, which is really nice. Okay, so I'm going to do the final import. Open, go back to the Twinmotion testing, and of course this time I'm going to change my collapse option to collapse all. So here we get a container just like the other one. Okay, but inside that container, I've only got one object, and that object shares the same name as the FBX model. So this is especially helpful when you need to bring in third-party objects or a large model that you want to control as a whole. Okay, because these individual items don't have their own pivot points like the other options had. So in this case, what I can do is I can just select that entire container and I can move this item around as one. Okay, and if I go to my my material assignment side of things, so I'm basically just showing you these things, elementary and the materials for now, because these are the important things. So if I leave my information over here, apply to object or replace material, it doesn't really matter which one I have. This tends to follow the rule of collapsing by material, which is your first option. Okay, so if there are different materials that it sees here from the Revit side of things, this is basically the same rules that it's going to follow. So in this case, I can only apply 3 different materials to these 4 walls, okay, because it's following the rules from collapsing by material. Also, always a good thing to just remember that, so let me quickly just delete this, and I'm just going to bring it in one more time over here. In this case, I will just choose something that gives me a slightly more options. Collapse by material is fine. Say okay. You've always got in your container over here your little eyes, remember, your hide items. So if you ever want to switch things on and off, you've always got the ability to do that here as well. Okay, and then finally, just one quick tip that I want to show you is that if you're in Revit and you don't want to go through the process of, you know, duplicating walls and creating new materials for them and things like that, what you can actually do is you can use your paint tool inside of Revit. Okay, so if I go and I rather just want to paint on items, I can do that. Paint on materials, excuse me. So I can go do exactly the same thing that we did right now, basically 2 face bricks over here. And obviously painting is a lot quicker. Select the carpet for here, and then for this final side we select ceiling tile. Why not? Say done, and I can export that. Now obviously if you do this, it's gonna create some interesting effects, however, because what you're doing is now you're basically breaking that wall apart into interior versus exterior, which is going to have, you know, some implications. So if I go and import that again, collapse by material is fine. So notice that collapse by material and all of the options are going to work the same way, right? You can see I can still apply one material to both of those because they both share the brick common. But notice the top of my wall, for example, is not colored. The interior of my wall I can have as a different material, but all 4 interior walls will adjust because remember I only painted the outside. So I'll be able to change the outside, but the interior is going to be all sort of one material. So you really need to think about how you want to handle your materials and how big your project is, how quickly you want to do things, how realistic you want to be. All of those things are obviously going to play into this. Okay, so that is everything that I wanted to show you. Just a really basic introduction because I think getting started, you often want to obviously import things and start playing around, and understanding those 3 options is going to be really important, and I think it's going to speed up your ability to actually just start playing and experimenting with the software a little bit more. So I really hope that you enjoy this. As I said, I'm going to be creating these videos on a more regular basis. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I will be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.